Do you feel that modeling agencies limit representation when you requested a petite model?
Definitely. It's very funny that you ask me this because when I was engaging with these modeling agencies, when they would get back to me, hi, my name is Jenna Loyal. I'm the founder and CEO of Pro Hac Vice, a new petite clothing brand for women 5'4" and under. We're based in New York and just launched this past June, actually.
Amazing. How has launch been?
It's been exciting and interesting. It definitely has been a ton of work, but really exciting to finally see the product and, bring the clothing pieces out into the world and have feedback from people on Instagram and, people who've been following the brand for a little bit of time because it's taken me a while. So I've had the Instagram up a lot longer than the actual clothing has been available. So it's nice to finally get it out there. And I also did have the opportunity to do a little pop-up at a market in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where I live last weekend. So it was nice to see people touch the clothes, feel them, and also get real-time feedback. So it's been very exciting, but also a huge learning curve, I will say.
Have you been to fashion school?
No, I have no industry background. I've always loved fashion, but I've taken a relatively traditional career path, a lawyer, and I actually still work my full-time job, but I always wanted to start my own company, and I always loved fashion, but I actually explored some other ideas before I thought of, creating a petite brand. And the reason I wanted to move forward with this idea is because I'm petite, I'm 5'1". I have so much trouble finding clothes that I actually like. And I started to talk to other women, and I found that they also had the same issues that I did with shopping clothing and finding things that they liked. So I was like, there seems to be white space here, and this is the idea I want to pursue, but I have no prior industry background.
That's so amazing. How did you feel going into that with no fashion school background, which is absolutely fine, obviously, but were you a bit nervous to pursue a career that you didn't have some, education in, or what were your feelings like doing that?
That's a great question. So it was very intimidating, I will say. I spent a lot of time doing research, just learning about how clothes are made from development to the production process. I read a lot of books, I read a lot of articles online, watched YouTube videos, listened to podcasts, and just did a ton of research and tried to see how I wanted to proceed. I also talked to a lot of people before I really did anything, just different contacts I really met through Instagram. Going back to your point about community, everyone's been very nice and willing to help and share knowledge and their perspective, but it was very intimidating. And I actually, to develop the line, I engaged a consulting firm, and they helped me with all of the technical aspects of development, as well as helping me source a factory that would be a good fit for my product. And especially since I'm working a full-time job while also doing this, I don't think it would have been possible without their help.
That's amazing. You also get to see a little bit of the back end of it as well, which definitely probably helped come up with some things and see things from a different perspective. But that's really interesting because I've yet to interview someone who's not gone to fashion school. So that's really interesting to see your background and how you developed and flourished in the industry. And I think a lot of other people would love to hear this as well, because not everyone goes to fashion school, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes you kind of find those passions when you've done something else and you're like, oh, I wish I maybe would have pursue this, but now I'm going to pursue it anyway just because it's my dream. What are your feelings like now that you've launched? Do you want this to be a full-time thing? What are your feelings like with that?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I mean, I would love for this to be my full-time thing whenever I'm able to make that happen. I really like being able to work on something that's a bit more creative and also does engage a business mind, you're a model, you work in the industry. There's so many different aspects of the fashion industry and so many different things you have to know to work in the industry. I feel like whether you're a designer on the business side, a model. So I would love to do this full time if I can eventually. Right now it's kind of like we're in listening to feedback and seeing how it goes mode, and also increasing, brand awareness. We're so new. So I'm taking it day by day.
Definitely. I think a lot of people who maybe don't have their own businesses, or especially, maybe they want to start a clothing brand, I think they think that it's really easy, and it's not. So I think a lot of people, especially with the creative industry, people just have the assumption that, well, it's just fun, isn't it? It's just like you get to be creative, but it's not. It's just so much more to it. So definitely that's so amazing that you're able to do all of this amazing work on top of your regular work as well. Let's kind of jump into the beginning stages. So if you wanted to explain your brand pillars a bit, let us know what you stand for.
Sure, absolutely. So Pro Hac Vice is based on 3 brand pillars from my perspective. And the first is self-expression and fashion forwardness. I just think fashion is such a great way to express one's personality. And I really wanted that to be a part of my brand, because I feel like many petite options available, they're kind of just basic, workwear, athleisure. If brands have a petite line, it's very small, and I feel like it doesn't give, petite customers a lot of room to play with. And, not everyone wants to wear office wear from Ann Taylor. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just wanted to incorporate the sense of self-expression and personality and personal style that goes into fashion. And what I admire so much in, independent and big brands that I just really like and, always have admired the work of. And then I'd say the second brand pillar is perfecting fit, which is obviously really important for petite customers. I don't think a lot of people realize that it takes more than just hemming something to make it fit well on a petite frame. There's so many adjustments that go into it. For our first line, and obviously we intend to do this going forward, we did several rounds of sampling with a model that was 5'1", so we could just get the garments right for the customer we would be serving. So that's super important to me. And then the last brand pillar is just thoughtfulness in design, development, and production. I just want to take a lot of thought in everything that I create. Quality over quantity, as the cliche goes. My vision for the brand is to kind of develop core silhouettes and build on from there based on what customers like and want, so that I could create clothing with some aspect of sustainability in mind, and, make sure I'm not overproducing things. I want to make things that people want to buy. I don't want to be wasteful. Also just, working with vendors and factories that work in ethical manner and, pay their people well, and just being thoughtful about the whole process and not creating just for the sake of creating.
That's absolutely amazing. So where do you draw your inspiration from when you're coming up with these collections?
I draw a lot of inspiration from women I admire who are both take pride in how they present themselves to the world and also are very accomplished. I think a lot of times people could view being very into fashion as somewhat frivolous. But I think it just goes into just your entire essence of how you present yourself to the world and how you interact with other people. And I view if you're well dressed and you take pride in putting together a great outfit, you probably put a lot of effort into whatever your work is, whether it's in fashion or a different industry, and just how you interact with other people. I also draw a lot of inspiration from art. The Lighten dress, which is the longer, more casual dress for our spring-summer 2023 collection, was really inspired from Slim Aaron's photography of Italy and the Amalfi Coast. So I draw a lot of inspiration from art. actually like interior design too, for colors and like textures and that sort of thing. And then I would just also say just other independent designers who are not necessarily designing for the petite market, but just I love their clothes and like how they operate, and I want to kind of be able to offer the same thing, but for the petite customer who often gets overlooked.
Yeah, we get overlooked so often. So I love that you're doing a lot of dresses as well, because that's the one thing that I find is really difficult. I find dresses, coats, and jeans to be my problem areas. So sometimes, but yeah, sometimes the jeans will fit lovely in my waist, but they're just way too long. Sometimes they fit in my legs and they don't fit my waist. It's just never right. But dress is the same thing. I can't ever find like a perfect fit. So I think dresses is such an amazing thing that we need, especially. It's just so hard to kind of find that right fit. So I really love that you mentioned that you're focusing on the fit, because that's such a big aspect of the reason why we can't find things right that fit perfectly. So you said you're petite yourself. You saw this gap in the market, obviously, and this is what you wanted to do. But what was that turning point where you're like, okay, this is not just an idea, I'm going to actually do this? We have these ideas sometimes, but putting it to action, that could be a bit tricky. When was that turning point for you when you're just like, okay, let's do this?
I think it was like a gradual process for me. I could be quite risk averse, typical for someone whose profession is like lawyer. We're known to not be the biggest risk takers. So I think it took me a while to get there. And I got there once I felt like I did enough research and I talked to a lot of people. I had decided that I was going to go with like a consulting firm to help me, because I initially toyed around with the idea of maybe I would just like do everything myself and work with different freelancers. But I thought that would have been too complicated, especially since I'm working a full-time job. And I basically was at the point of like, I'm either doing this or I'm not, and I just need to take the next step. And what I ask myself is, when I'm 65 or 75, and looking back, if I never tried this or did it, would I regret it? And the answer was yes. So if I didn't try, I know I would regret it down the line. So I knew I needed to take the next step and actually like really, pursue creating this brand and business.
That's actually so funny that you said. I have that same exact like kind of output. I always say when I'm 65 or 70 and I look back on my life and I had all these ideas and I didn't do it, how would I feel as that 65, 7-year-old, like as myself? So that's so interesting that you said that, because I think the exact same way. I always kind of give myself that perspective of you just have to try it, because you'll never know. And if you don't do it, then it'll always be a no. That's what I always tell everyone, even people who want to model and they're like, oh, I don't know if you want that, and if you have that idea and dream, if you don't try, you'll never know. So I always say that. I think that that's so interesting for people who even want to start their own brand. So what's kind of your biggest piece of advice looking back at your starting stages now for someone who wants to start their own brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I have a few pieces of advice. This is more a practical piece of advice. Just be mindful of where you spend your money. And I think looking back, I spent a lot of money at the beginning on getting someone to like create a brand book for me, create a logo. The logo, like, it came out fabulous. I was very happy with it. And the brand book was helpful too, sort of like just kind of giving me some structure in how I would start approaching like social media and the market. But I do think it actually was like probably a little bit too early at that stage. So I'd say you don't need to have the most expensive graphic designer or start doing like a brand book or getting someone to customize a font for your website, things like that. You kind of don't need to spend a lot of money on at the beginning. I think it's better to like, have a clear sense of where you want to take the brand, have someone make a nice logo for you, and then go forward. Another piece of advice I've been following is start small, make a couple of pieces, test test them out and iterate from there. And then also I would say, don't underestimate how challenging it is creating brand awareness and marketing effectively. Obviously, I'm very early on in the process. I think like building brand awareness and marketing is almost more difficult than creating a good product.
Yeah.
It's more challenging than I ever would have imagined, especially with Instagram, which is like great in a lot of ways because it is like a very low bar to entry to kind of just get your name out there, but there is so much. So it's kind of hard to rise above all the noise, even in a very niche market like the petite market. Marketing and creating brand awareness is probably like one of the bigger challenges of being a new brand, and just be prepared for that. And I think like the earlier you start on those tasks, the better.
Right. So that's something that I think a lot of people that go to fashion school actually don't think about, the business side. You know, you're going to fashion school, let's say, for example, and you know how to draw or you know how to make a tech pack or all that stuff. But then you're like, okay, well, now I need to market myself. How do I do that? Now I need to grow an audience and I need to do all of these other things. And that takes so much time, effort, and even sometimes money if you're running ads or things like that. So yeah, there's so much that goes into it. Just the side, like you said, the creative part, that's all fun and great. But then it's like, okay, how am I going to get this out there now? So yeah, definitely. I definitely agree that creating your platform is tricky as well. And it's something to definitely pay attention to, that process. So what has been the most difficult thing that you've faced as a designer so far?
The most difficult thing at a general level is just the learning curve of this industry. There are just so many moving parts that go into creating a brand, making everything from the development of clothing to sourcing a factory to finding fabric vendors to getting the right fabric for what you want to make, and then all of the other, like we were just talking about, like business related tasks that you need to do in terms of marketing, selling, social media. I'd say that the most difficult part is just a steep learning curve. For me in particular, I think probably this will vary for, you know, people who've maybe had a different background than I have, and like maybe some industry experience, is being able to like learn everything and, you know, get comfortable, and even learning how to like ask the right questions when you have engaged people for help. If someone out there wants to create a brand with no industry experience and takes a similar route that I did, I will say that the people I worked with, I was really able to learn alongside them, and they included me in the process. So it's definitely, you know, I guess it depends who you work with, but it's possible to learn. It just takes time, and it can be very intimidating.
Right, but that's so inspiring that you still chose to follow everything that you dream of. And I think that's really admirable for people who maybe they chose a different route. Because for me, for example, I went to business school to begin with. And then I was like, no, I want to go to fashion school. I want to pursue kind of my other dreams. But let's say I just stayed into business school and I still wanted to start a brand or something like that. That's so admirable to hear you tell your story to maybe someone who's gone down a different path, but now they kind of want to go back. So that's really amazing to hear, and definitely really inspiring for others. So going back to fashion school, do you believe that you must go to fashion school to become a designer? Obviously not, right?
No, I don't believe that you have to. I think it's definitely possible to become a designer without industry experience. I think it will be harder because, you know, you don't have like the baseline level of knowledge that someone who went to fashion school would, but I don't think it's necessary.
I definitely agree. And what is something you wish you knew before you started in this industry?
I think, and I was kind of aware of this, but just how capital intensive it is to start a new brand. And then going back to some of the things that we had already discussed, is that marketing and creating brand awareness will probably be one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge.
So just to hear your take on the industry, have you worked with any modeling agencies yet, or do you find your models through social media? How have you been going about that?
I've only done one photo shoot so far, which was for my launch, and I ended up working with models that I connected with on Instagram. However, I also did engage a few agencies to potentially work with a model that way. So ultimately, I worked with people I met through Instagram, but I also explored the agency route as well.
Talking about the agency route, do you feel that modeling agencies limit representation when you requested a petite model?
Definitely. It's very funny that you ask me this because when I was planning my photo shoot and I was engaging with these modeling agencies, I would reach out to them with an email and I would be very specific about what my brand was, what type of model I needed, which was obviously someone who's 5'4" or under. Well, for one, I found that agencies just had very limited number of petite models that they represented. And then when I found that a lot of times when they would get back to me, they would send like a recommendation of one petite model, her portfolio, and then they'd send me like 3 other people who were like 5'7". I was just getting very frustrated because that wasn't what I asked for at all. And it's like, you can't take someone who's 5'6" or 5'7" and plug them into your campaign for a petite brand, especially because providing like more options and also representation to the petite community is so important to me. That would have just, I feel like, been totally against like the whole ethos of my brand. And I found they didn't listen very well to what I wanted.
Yeah, I think that a lot of modeling agencies, they're like, well, designers just don't really need them, do they? When you're asking for a petite model and they're like, yeah, here's one, but then look at these other 5 models I think would kind of go well with what you're doing. It's like, no, that's not what we want. And also, as a designer, you're paying for these services. It's not like you're just requesting someone and there's no transaction going through with that. It's like essentially a customer at the end of the day for them. You're paying for a service, right? You're paying for something and that's not what you're asking for. And I feel like a lot of times these agencies, they choose to do these kinds of things because they know that obviously, especially in the fashion world now, I feel like everything is changing. There's a big shift going on currently, I feel, at least within this last like year, I would say, and more petite brands popping up, which is absolutely amazing. But now we kind of see that these agencies, even though we already knew that they were really lacking in obviously petite models, I think from the outside looking in, more people now are seeing the gaps within the storyline almost with agencies because they just say that designers don't need them. But it's like, especially now with all these brands popping up, we see that they just don't really care, right? The modeling agencies are just like, well, this is what we have really, so here you go.
100%. Yeah, it was funny. I felt it was very much like, the cliche of trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. I guess they were hoping maybe I'd be like, okay, the 5'7" girl is like, we'll take her. I think like they're going to need to change as more petite brands come up, and even just not even petite per se, but I'm seeing more and more like adaptive brands, people who have certain disabilities, like they're gonna need like models who represent that demographic as well. Hopefully things continue to evolve for the better.
Definitely. And do you feel like the fashion industry has a different perception on petite fashion lines versus petite models, or do you think it's the same?
I think just generally, I think the petite segment, whether it's a fashion line or models who are petite and work within that industry, I do feel like we're kind of like viewed as not on the same level as other brands who cater to, the traditional fashion market. Almost like you're like kind of a little bit less than, not on the same level. That's the sense that I get.
Have you felt any of that specifically when you were developing your brand? Has anyone kind of made reference to that?
No, I think at least all the feedback I've gotten to my face at least has been very positive. But I do think there is a ways to go in kind of getting people to view petite as on par with just, a traditional fashion brand. I think historically the petite clothing market, and I think this is part and parcel to it being so underserved, has been viewed as like, oh, the like grandma clothing shoved to the back of the department store. Hopefully that's changing, because I am seeing so many amazing brands come up in the petite market, especially now.
Me too. I definitely see a shift because I started modeling when I was 17 and now I'm 22. And definitely when I was in my earlier stages, I definitely faced way more like harsh, why has that even happened kind of things with casting directors saying really nasty things. And just like, I don't know, I think really early on it was much harder because you didn't really see petite models at all when I first started. I normally, in each show that I was at, was the only remotely short person. So I really at the beginning faced some really nasty things. You know, I have really thick skin, so I was like, okay, I'm going to keep pushing because this is what I want to do. And ultimately now I see so many shorter models at Fashion Week, which I never saw before when I first started. It just wasn't.
That's amazing.
It's definitely amazing to see that growth. I mean, definitely we're still not at where we need to be, but at least now we're getting some more representation in which we need, and you know, we're kind of standing together with this. And we mentioned before the interview started, but how the petite community is just so, I feel like, loving and embracing each other, and we're just helping each other out. And you don't really see that in the fashion industry. I think petite community, you know, we're really trying to help each other out, and we know that this is where we need to push the fashion industry. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I've met so many lovely people who are starting petite brands and in the petite market models as well. And it just seems like there's a really nice community there. It doesn't feel cutthroat, or I guess one could view as all these brands in competition with one another, but it does seem like everyone tries to like genuinely help each other out and support each other's brands. And like the funny thing is, though, even though we're all in the same petite space, speaking about clothing brands specifically, I feel like all of them are so different. And, you know, people just have so many different styles that they like to wear. And it's like, you know, company A's customer is not necessarily going to wear my dresses, but there's going to be like a whole group of women who will. I think it's just like they're, you know, regular traditional brands. Like there needs to be something out there for everyone, and hopefully we're moving towards that.
Definitely feel that. So what do you suggest aspiring models do to get started in the industry from a designer's perspective?
Being persistent and tenacious, and also like networking, and don't be afraid to reach out to people, and you know, even with a like a DM or a cold email. I think just putting yourself out there, being persistent and networking and talking to a lot of different people is like a great way to get started. And I know like I'm receptive when people reach out to me, and I think others will be too. And then when you do work with a company, in addition to skills, which of course are needed, being good to work with is my best advice. Pleasant, easygoing.
I don't know if you know, but I teach modeling classes as well to aspiring models, and that's something I always touch upon. You have to be genuine to everyone, be nice to everyone, because you all have to work together. There's some models who are just absolutely awful that I've come in contact with to everyone around them because they think that they're like the star of the show. It's like, no, we're working with someone. Do you know what I mean? It's not all about us.
I think you find that in every industry to some degree.
It's so bad, and it's just not enjoyable to work in that presence, at least for me. And so I just always tell everyone, don't let being a model go to your head. Have a genuine connection with everyone, be nice to everyone. And do you prefer DMs? Do you prefer emails when someone reaches out to you?
Really mind. I think DM is probably like the quickest way, but it doesn't make a difference to me. And I know like whenever someone reaches out to me, I try to be as responsive as possible. Sometimes, you know, it takes me a minute because of, you know, I have like my day job to contend with as well. Yeah, either way, I'm not particular with that.
And what do you look for in the models that you cast specifically?
I think again, like just someone who's genuine, nice, easy to work with. And then I will say also someone who brings like some creativity to what they do. I think, for example, with my brand shoot, the models really made the clothes and my vision come alive. And a lot of it was due to their like creativity in how they posed, how they presented themselves. Yeah, be easy and nice to work with and pleasant to work with, and bring your creativity to the process, because I know myself as like a business owner and designer that I really appreciate that.
What does your next 5 years look like? What goals do you have for Pro Hac Vice?
I mean, 5 years seems so far away, but I think my short to midterm plan is to continue working to increase brand awareness for Pro Hac Vice, and I'd love to continue to add to our offerings and create styles once I have a bit more feedback from this collection. My kind of vision for the brand is to create signature silhouettes and then work off of those to create new styles with different fabrics, maybe like a different sleeve, that sort of thing, so I could leverage what's already been built in development, since development is so expensive for a fashion brand. And I mean, I do have really big aspirations for Pro Hac Vice. I would like to grow it as big as I can while still adhering to my brand pillars of thoughtfulness in development and production and perfecting fit and just doing everything really well. Yeah, it takes time and I'm taking it day by day, but I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be a matter of just, increasing brand awareness, getting the word out more, and continue to develop more styles based on feedback from customers.
Amazing. And do you see any fashion weeks in your future?
It's definitely something I would consider. I think right now I'm not at that point. One of the big reasons is just because it's so expensive to do a fashion show. But I mean, I would love to do that one day for sure.
And so lastly, what does fashion mean to you?
At its core, to me, fashion is a way to communicate your personality and essence without using any words. And I think that also ties into the first brand pillar for Pro Hac Vice around self-expression. But I think at the end of the day, that's what fashion means to me.
Amazing. And if you wanted to include any last minute things, if you want to plug your brand in and tell us where everyone can find you.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun to chat with you today. If people want to find me, Instagram handle and Facebook as well is at Shop Pro Hac Vice. And my name is Jenna Loyal, and I'd love to hear from you.
And your website is all active. You've launched, so
yes,
where you're shipping to and all that great stuff.
The website is also www.shopprohacvice.com, and then I am currently shipping to the United States and Canada as well as the European Union, and I am working on the United Kingdom as well. I'd love to expand even further than that.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Marissa.